The house stood at the edge of the old road, small and worn, with cracks in the walls that no one bothered to fix anymore. The roof leaked when it rained, and the door made a tired sound every time it opened. Inside lived a family that had learned how to survive with very little. They were not poor by choice, and they were not lazy. Life had simply been hard on them for a long time. Every morning began before sunrise. The man of the house woke up quietly so he would not disturb the others. He washed his face with cold water, put on the same faded shirt he wore every day, and stepped outside while the air was still cool. He worked wherever he could find work loading trucks, fixing fences, cleaning shops. Some days he came home with a little money. Some days he came home with nothing but dust on his hands and tired eyes. His partner stayed back in the house, making sure the children were ready for school. Breakfast was simple. Sometimes it was just bread and tea. Other times it was leftover rice warmed on the stove. The children never complained. They had learned early not to ask for things their parents could not give. They shared everything, even when it meant each of them got less. The neighborhood they lived in was quiet but forgotten. People there were used to broken roads, power cuts, and promises that never came true. Yet, despite everything, there was a sense of community. Neighbors greeted each other, shared small favors, and watched over one another's children. The family was known for being respectful and kind. Even when they had almost nothing, they never turned away someone who needed help. In the evenings, when the man returned home, the family sat together on the floor. There was no television, only conversation. They talked about the day, about school, about small dreams that felt far away but still gave comfort. Laughter was soft, but real. It did not cost anything, and it helped them forget hunger for a while. That particular day had started like any other. The man had found work at a warehouse across town. It was hard labor, and the pay was low, but he accepted it without question. As the sun began to set, he started the long walk back home. The road was quiet. It's only the sound of distant traffic and the wind moving through dry leaves. Halfway home, something caught his eye near the side of the road. At first, he thought it was a pile of discarded clothes. People often dumped things there. But as he got closer, he noticed a shape that did not belong. A man was lying on the ground, barely moving. He stopped walking. For a moment, fear held him still. Helping a stranger could mean trouble. It could mean questions, police, expenses he could not afford. He looked around to see if anyone else was nearby. The road was empty. The sky was growing darker. He took a cautious step closer. The man on the ground looked badly hurt. His clothes were expensive, but torn and dirty. There was dried blood on his forehead, and his breathing was slow and uneven. The man of the house bent down and spoke, but there was no response. He felt a heavy weight in his chest. Walking away would be easier. He could tell himself that someone else would help, that it was not his responsibility. He had a family waiting at home, mouths to feed, worries already too many to count, but his feet would not move. He thought about his children, about what he taught them every day without words. He thought about how he would explain this moment if they ever asked. Slowly, he reached out and checked the injured man's pulse. It was weak, but it was there. He made a decision that would change everything. With great effort, he lifted the stranger. The man was heavier than he looked. Step by step, he carried him toward his home, stopping often to catch his breath. By the time he reached the house, his arms were shaking. Sweat covered his face. When his partner opened the door and saw what he was carrying, her eyes widened in shock. She wanted to ask questions, but one look at the injured man told her this was serious. Without hesitation, she helped him lay the stranger down on the floor. They cleaned his wounds with the little clean water they had. They used an old cloth to stop the bleeding. There was no doctor, no medicine, and no money to call for help. All they could offer was care, patience, and prayer. That night, no one slept much. The children stayed quiet, watching from a distance. They could sense that something important was happening. The stranger groaned softly at times, and each sound made the family tense. The partner sat beside him, wiping his forehead and whispering words of comfort, even though she did not know if he could hear her. The man of the house stood near the door listening to the sounds outside, worried that someone might come asking questions. Hours passed. Slowly, at some point before morning, the injured man opened his eyes. They were filled with confusion and pain. He tried to speak, but no words came out. The partner gently told him to rest. She told him he was safe. He closed his eyes again, tears slipping down the side of his face. When the sun rose, the house looked the same as it always did, but something had changed inside it. The family was exhausted, hungry, and scared. Yet none of them regretted the choice they had made. They did not know who the man was. They did not know what he owned, where he came from, or why he had been left to die on the road. All they knew was that he was human, and he needed them. Outside, the world continued as usual, unaware that a simple act of kindness had just begun a story that would reach far beyond that small, broken house. The injured man lay on the floor, barely conscious, while the family worked quietly around him. They had no formal training, no experience with serious injuries, only their instincts and a desire to help. They used warm water to wash his face and hands, and they bandaged the cuts as best as they could with torn pieces of cloth. The smell of antiseptic was missing, but the smell of care filled the small room. The children watched from a corner. They were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they knew enough to be frightened. Their small hands clutched at each other, and they peeked through the space between their father's legs. They could hear the groans and the shallow breathing of the stranger. Every sound made their hearts jump. The father whispered to his partner, telling her to keep an eye on the stranger's breathing, to make sure he did not choke or stop breathing. She nodded, trying to remain calm even though she felt a storm of worry inside. She wiped the stranger's forehead with a damp cloth and murmured gentle words she hoped he could hear. Hours passed. The injured man's breathing became steadier, and his face slowly lost the paleness of shock. He moved slightly, opening his eyes for a few seconds and closing them again, not yet able to speak. The family prepared a small bowl of porridge and offered it to him, though he could only sip a little. Each swallow seemed to give him strength. Outside, the world went on as usual. But inside the small house, time felt different. Every moment was measured by the stranger's condition. The family shared small smiles when they saw him improve, and every groan or shiver brought their attention back to him. Their own hunger and exhaustion were pushed aside, replaced by the quiet determination to save a life. The neighbor's cat wandered near the door, and the children giggled softly when it brushed against their legs. This small moment of normalcy reminded them that life continued even in the darkest times. They whispered to each other, asking when he would be able to speak, when he would be able to tell them who he was, and why no one had come to help him. The man of the house decided to keep watch through the night. He sat on a small stool near the door, listening for any sounds outside, any sign that someone might come looking. He thought about the risks. What if the police arrived? Or what if the man was wanted by someone dangerous? But each time he looked at the stranger's pale face, he knew he could not abandon him. When the first light of morning entered through the cracks in the windows, the injured man moved again. He lifted his hand slightly and tried to sit up, but his strength was not enough. The partner helped him, supporting his back and shoulders. They noticed his expensive clothes, torn and dirty, and realized that this man must be important. But importance did not matter to them. He was human, and he needed help. Days passed slowly. The family fed him what little food they had, helped him bathe in the small basin, and kept his wounds clean. The man began to gain strength, though he remained weak and quiet. Sometimes he would stare into the distance, and the children would ask if he was thinking of home. He could not answer. But the gentle tone of his voice when he tried gave them hope. The family shared stories with him in small doses. They told him about their days, about how they worked and what they dreamed of. They did not ask questions about him, respecting his silence. It became clear that he had been through something terrible, something that left him scared and unsure of the world around him. The family's patience gave him a small sense of safety. Late one evening, the father asked the stranger gently if he remembered anything, who he was, or where he came from. The man opened his eyes slowly, looked at the ceiling, and then at the family. He tried to speak, but only a whisper emerged. It was not clear what he said, but they could feel the gratitude in his tone. That small whisper made all their effort feel worth it. The children became braver with each day. They began to help by fetching water, bringing food, or simply sitting nearby to keep the man company. They learned that kindness was stronger than fear, and that helping someone in need could bring more satisfaction than receiving anything in return. The house was still small, the food was still meager, but something invisible filled the Spaza's sense of purpose and quiet pride. The stranger's wounds slowly healed, but his spirit was still fragile. He remained careful with every movement, hesitant to trust. Yet he began to observe the family, noticing small details: the way the children shared their food, the way the father carried heavy loads without complaint, the way the partner kept the home clean and comforting despite having so little. It became clear to him that this family had given him more than medical care. They had given him attention, respect, and hope. They had risked what little they had, put themselves in possible danger, and done everything without expecting a reward. This realization brought a quiet, deep emotion he had not felt in years. One evening, the family gathered in the small living space to share what little they had for dinner. The man tried to sit with them, but his strength was limited. Still, they welcomed him. He managed a small smile, and the children's laughter echoed softly. It was the first time he had allowed himself to relax in days. As the sun set and the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink, the man quietly watched the family interact. He realized that in a world where money and power were supposed to mean everything, this family had nothing. Yet they had more courage, kindness, and humanity than he had seen in years. It was a lesson he did not expect to learn. He began to whisper thanks in his own way, small words that the family did not fully understand, but they heard the sincerity. It became a ritual, a small connection between him and the family, bridging the gap between their worlds. By the end of the week, the stranger could stand with support and take small steps around the house. The father showed him how to move safely without straining. The partner prepared small meals that were easy to eat, and the children watched with quiet admiration. Each day was progress, each small step a victory, though they still did not know his identity. The family began to feel a deep bond with the man. Their lives were simple, their possessions few, but their hearts were full. They learned that sometimes saving a life was not about money or tools, but about presence, care, and unwavering commitment. And so the days passed, each one teaching lessons that went beyond the physical healing of the stranger. It was a lesson in trust, in courage, and in the quiet strength that comes from helping someone when no one else will. The family had nothing, yet they gave everything they could, and in doing so, they were beginning a story that neither they nor the stranger would ever forget. Days turned into weeks, and the injured man grew stronger. His muscles regained some of their former strength, his wounds finally healed, and his eyes lost the shadow of pain that had haunted them. The family continued their care, though now their roles shifted from urgent help to steady support. They shared meals, laughter, and quiet moments together. The house, once filled with worry and tension, now had a gentle rhythm of life. The man began to speak more, though cautiously. He asked small questions about the family's daily life, about their work, and about the children's school. His voice was soft, careful, as if every word needed permission to exist. The family answered freely, never probing too much about him, letting him open up at his own pace. Trust, they had learned, could not be forced. It grew slowly, like a plant nurtured through stormy weather. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, the father noticed the stranger staring out the window, lost in thought. He walked over quietly and asked if he was thinking of something. The man turned and smiled faintly, shaking his head. There was a sadness in his eyes, a weight that the family could feel without words. They did not push him. Instead, they sat beside him, silent but present, letting him know he was not alone. Over time, small gestures became meaningful. The man learned to make himself useful, helping with small chores around the house. He swept the floor, fetched water, and even helped the children with their school lessons. These tasks, simple as they were, became a form of healing for him and for the family. They did not see him as a burden anymore. He was becoming one of them, quietly and naturally. The children. who had once been timid in his presence, now spoke to him openly. They asked him about the places he had seen, about stories he remembered, and about the world beyond their small neighborhood. He would smile, sometimes chuckling softly, and answer carefully, making sure to keep the stories appropriate, but letting them dream just by listening. Their laughter filled the house, a sound that had been rare before his arrival. The partner of the house noticed the change in him too. At first he had been withdrawn, almost wary of kindness. Now he began to show moments of tenderness, helping without being asked, offering quiet words of appreciation, and even taking the time to listen. It was as if the family's warmth had melted a layer of fear and caution that he had carried for years. He had been alone for so long, surrounded by wealth and power, yet never truly seen. Here he was seen fully and without judgment. One morning, father brought home a small loaf of bread and a few vegetables he had managed to buy. The man noticed immediately that the family had sacrificed, even though they were still struggling. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, but also humility. He wanted to give something back, but he did not know how. Money could not be offered, for he did not know if it would be accepted. Gifts seemed meaningless in a home built on care and sacrifice. The man began observing the family more closely, noticing the little things that spoke of character. He saw the patience in how they guided the children, the way they shared what little they had, the quiet strength in every action. It struck him that these people had nothing in material wealth, yet they possessed a richness of heart that was rare. Even among the wealthiest individuals he had known, the contrast made him reflect on his own life, filled with luxury, but often empty of real connection. One afternoon, a small incident reminded everyone of the risks they had taken. A delivery man from a nearby store arrived to collect a payment they could not fully afford. The father tried to explain, apologizing for the delay. The stranger intervened quietly, offering to pay a portion, though the family refused. He insisted gently, saying that it was not charity, but a way to ensure the family did not suffer for helping him. This act, simple yet powerful, showed a small glimpse of his intentions and character. As days passed, the family noticed subtle changes in him. He became more relaxed in their home, more willing to smile, and occasionally, he laughed a sound that seemed foreign at first, yet filled the air with warmth. The children would mimic him, asking him to tell more stories, and making him join their games. The man realized that he had not experienced this kind of joy in years. It was not wealth, not power, not success. It was the simple, quiet connection with people who cared without condition. The family also began noticing moments of reflection in him. He would sometimes stare at the walls or out the window, lost in thought. It was clear he was remembering his life before, the pressures, the expectations, the isolation. And yet, he no longer seemed entirely burdened. There was hope in those quiet moments, a small glimmer that life could be more than what he had known. The family never asked him to explain. They simply allowed him to be present, a silent companion to his memories. One evening, after a long day, the family sat together quietly. The man spoke softly, thanking them for everything, though he struggled to find the right words. He said he did not know how to repay them, how to make them understand the depth of his gratitude. The father placed a hand on his shoulder, simply saying that helping someone in need was its own reward. The partner nodded, adding that they had done what anyone would hope to do. The children listened, understanding in their simple, clear way that kindness was its own form of wealth. Despite his growing comfort, the man remained cautious. He had lived a life where trust was rare, where appearances often hid intentions. But with this family, he saw honesty in every gesture, every word, every act of care. Slowly, he began to let down the walls he had built around himself. He started to share pieces of his past, small stories about places he had visited, lessons he had learned, and mistakes he had made. The family listened with interest and empathy, never judging, never interrupting. As the weeks turned into months, a bond grew stronger. The stranger and the family became a single unit in many ways, a small world built on trust, care, and shared experience. The house, once defined by struggle and scarcity, became a place of quiet love and strength. Each person contributed in their own way, and the presence of the stranger added a layer of gratitude and reflection that none had anticipated. One afternoon, the stranger helped the father repair a small section of the fence outside. As they worked side by side, he spoke about the importance of honesty, perseverance, and the small acts that shape a person's character. The father nodded, understanding that he had been living these lessons daily, without recognition. It was a rare exchange of understanding between two very different lives. Yet the connection was real and meaningful. The children learned from this too. They saw how people from different worlds could meet, help each other, and find common ground. They saw that kindness was stronger than fear, stronger than wealth, stronger than circumstance. These lessons, learned without lectures, stayed with them in quiet, meaningful ways. By now, the man had begun walking freely around the neighborhood with the family. Neighbors noticed him and offered greetings, surprised by the presence of someone who looked wealthy yet humble. The stranger greeted them warmly, observing the contrast between his previous life and the simplicity of this community. He realized that he had been searching for something that money could not buy. And here, in this small house, and among these simple people, he had found it. At night, when the family gathered for dinner or conversation, he often remained silent for a moment, reflecting. Then he would join in, offering small observations or asking questions. His presence was no longer a burden. It was a gift. The family's kindness had transformed him, and in turn, he brought a quiet dignity and care that enriched their lives. The man understood something fundamental in helping him. The family had not only saved his life, they had saved his spirit. They had reminded him of the value of humanity, of connection, and of love that cannot be measured in material terms. He had arrived in pain, alone and vulnerable. Now, he was part of a small family that needed him as much as he needed them, and so the days continued. The house remained small, the furniture worn, the meals simple, but inside there was strength, healing, and a profound sense of purpose. Each member of the household had grown through struggle, care, and shared experience. The stranger had become a part of their lives, and in doing so, had discovered something he had long forgotten: that human connection, honesty, and compassion are the true measures of wealth and worth. The story was far from over. Changes, choices, and revelations awaited. But in this small window of time, the family and the man had discovered a truth that would remain with them forever, that even in scarcity, generosity, and even in fear, courage, the human heart can flourish. And in those quiet, ordinary moments, the extraordinary had begun. As the weeks passed, the injured man grew stronger, more confident in walking, speaking, and even helping around the house. The family had settled into a routine that included him seamlessly, though they never pried into his past. They had learned to offer care without asking for anything in return, and he had begun to appreciate that in ways he did not expect. One morning, the man quietly told the family that he had an important matter to attend to, and that he would be leaving soon. He did not explain why, only that it was necessary. The family's hearts sank. Though he had become part of their daily lives, they understood that life could not always stay in one place, and sometimes obligations beyond their small world called. The father asked if they could help in any way, and the man shook his head. He smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and sadness in his expression. The partner hugged him gently, and the children clung to his hands. There were no harsh words, no arguments, only quiet acceptance and understanding that sometimes goodbyes were part of life. He left before sunrise, carrying only a small bag, and did not look back. The house felt emptier than it had in months, and the children asked when he might return. The parents could not answer. They knew that he had to go, but they also knew that he would always carry a part of them with him. In the days that followed, the family continued their lives, though everything seemed slightly different. Touched by the experience of having helped someone so profoundly, weeks passed without word from the man. The family wondered if he was safe, if he remembered them, if he had made it back to where he belonged. They continued their work, struggled through their financial challenges, and held on to the lessons of kindness and compassion they had learned during his stay. The children would occasionally speak of him, recalling his stories and laughter, wondering how someone so important could have been so humble and gentle. Then, one day the family received a letter. It was simple, written on fine paper, with words that made their hearts race. In it, the man expressed his deep gratitude, explained that he had been unable to communicate his identity fully before leaving. He told them that their actions had saved more than his life. They had saved his trust in people, and reminded him of what was truly valuable. He spoke of humility, kindness, the courage of ordinary people who do extraordinary things through selflessness. The letter went on to explain that he wished to repay them, not with a fleeting gift, but by changing their lives in a way that would endure. He included instructions that would ensure the children could go to school without worry, that the home would be safe and comfortable, and that the family would have resources to live without constant fear of scarcity. He asked them to continue living as they always had, with honesty, patience, and care. But without the burden of financial struggle, the family was stunned. They read the letter together, tears streaming down their faces. The father's hand shook as he held the paper, and the partner embraced him tightly. The children listened quietly, understanding that this was something beyond imagination. They had given what little they had, expecting nothing in return. And now the universe had responded in a way they could not have foreseen. Within days, the stranger returned in person. He was no longer weak or injured, but standing tall and confident. He entered the house quietly, observing the family before speaking. The children ran to him, and he lifted them in his arms, smiling genuinely, a warmth in his eyes that could not be faked. The partner embraced him, tears in her eyes, and the father shook his hand firmly, almost unable to believe the transformation that had taken place. He had brought gifts. Not the flashy kind, but gifts that mattered deeply. Documents for a safe home, resources for education, and support to ensure the family could live without constant worry. He had also brought something less tangible, but more profound: reassurance that kindness mattered, that helping someone in need could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. The family was overwhelmed, humbled, and deeply moved. The man sat with them for hours that day, sharing stories, listening to updates about their lives, and laughing with the children. He explained that his absence had been necessary. He had needed to ensure he could return with help that was meaningful, not just temporary. He told them that their actions had reminded him of the world's capacity for goodness, and that he wanted to honor that lesson in the only way he could. As the weeks turned into months, the family's life began to transform. The children could attend school with proper supplies and support. The house was repaired and made safe, and small joys returned to their lives. Yet, despite the changes, the family remained the same in heart and character. They had been given stability and security, but they had not been changed into people who valued wealth over compassion. They continued to share, to care, and to live with the same honesty they had always known. The stranger became a regular presence, though never imposing. He would visit, check on the family, and sometimes work alongside them on small projects. The bond between them had evolved from necessity to genuine connection, a friendship forged through crisis and strengthened by respect and gratitude. He observed how their lives were simple but full of love and purpose, and he learned from them as much as they had learned from him. Through it all, the family noticed that he had changed as well. The stress and isolation of his former life seemed to have melted away, replaced by humility and a quiet understanding of what mattered. He had wealth and influence, yet he found joy in simple things: sharing a meal, watching the children play, and conversing honestly with people he respected. His presence was not about power or prestige. It was about connection and appreciation. The story spread slowly through the neighborhood, not through gossip or publicity, but through the small kindnesses and generosity that followed. Neighbors observed the family's improved circumstances and the man's ongoing humility, and it inspired others quietly. The ripple effect of that single act of care, given without expectation, began to touch many lives in ways the family could never have imagined, even as life stabilized. The family and the stranger continued to share moments that were simple but profound. They celebrated small achievements, like a child learning to read well, or the father completing a long project successfully. They comforted each other during moments of worry or fear. Every day became a reminder that life's true richness came not from wealth, but from connection, compassion, and trust. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of red, the man sat quietly with the family on the porch. The air was warm, and the sounds of the neighborhood drifted gently through the evening. He looked at each member of the family, his heart full of gratitude and understanding. He realized that he had found something far more valuable than money or power. He had found humanity in its purest form, and in that quiet moment, all of them understood something important, that life could change in an instant, that courage and kindness could ripple outward in ways no one expected, and that the bonds formed through shared care and selflessness were stronger than anything money could buy. The family had saved a man's life, but in doing so, they had created a story of hope, love, transformation that would endure forever. Life in the small house had changed completely, yet the family remained grounded in their daily routines. The home was now safe and comfortable. The children had everything they needed for school, and the family no longer worried about basic survival. Despite this transformation, the essence of their lives, their humility, kindness, and perseverance remained untouched. They were the same people. Only now, with the stability to dream bigger and live more freely, the stranger, now fully recovered, continued to visit regularly. His presence was no longer about needing help or receiving care. Instead, it was about connection, friendship, and gratitude. He would sit with the family, sharing meals, telling stories, and listening to their own tales of everyday life. He had grown fond of the children, taking an interest in their education and dreams, and he supported their aspirations quietly but meaningfully. One day, he suggested a small project. He wanted to help the neighborhood, starting with the road in front of their home, which was filled with potholes and debris. The father and the stranger worked side by side, lifting stones, mixing cement, and leveling the path. Neighbors joined in, inspired by the collaboration. What had started as a personal act of kindness had begun to spread outward, creating a ripple of generosity and community spirit. The children watched, fascinated. They saw that one act of courage and kindness could inspire many others. The stranger had come into their lives as a man in need, and now he was giving back, not just to them, but to the community that had nurtured them. The lesson was clear. Generosity, when genuine, multiplies. Evenings were quiet and full of warmth. The family and the stranger would gather on the porch, watching the sunset and the neighborhood slowly settle into night. Conversations flowed easily now. They laughed together, shared hopes for the future, and reflected on the journey that had brought them together. Every word, every story, every smile reinforced the bond they had formed through trials, care, and trust. The stranger also began mentoring the father in ways that went beyond money or influence. He encouraged him to pursue opportunities that had once seemed out of reach, helping him develop skills, plan for the future, and find confidence in himself. The father absorbed these lessons, learning not just about business or success, but about patience, perseverance, and the value of human relationships. The partner found herself inspired as well. She began organizing small gatherings in the neighborhood, teaching skills, sharing knowledge, and creating a network of support. The family had always been generous, but now they had the means to extend that generosity in a more structured way. It was a quiet revolution of kindness. Born from a single act of courage and nurtured through trust and compassion, the children flourished. They attended school with proper materials, guidance, and encouragement. They studied hard, not just for grades, but to honor the opportunity they had been given. They understood that their success was tied to the lessons of kindness and courage their family had shown. And the stranger remained a guiding presence, offering advice, encouragement, and friendship without ever imposing. Over time, the stranger shared more about his own life. Not to boast, but to explain the contrasts he had seen. He spoke of the emptiness of wealth without connection, the loneliness of success that came at the expense of empathy. The family listened, sometimes silently, sometimes asking questions, but always with understanding. These stories reinforced what they already knew: that character. Courage and love mattered more than money or power. Then came a day that would remain in their memories forever. The stranger gathered the family in the living room, a soft smile on his face. He explained that he had arranged for their long-term security, a stable home, support for education, and resources to live comfortably. But he also emphasized that the most important wealth was not material. It was the bond they had created, the courage they had shown, and the kindness they had given freely. Tears filled the room as the family realized the depth of his gratitude. They had given everything they could without expectation, and now they were being honored in a way that transcended money. The stranger hugged each of them, lingering on each embrace as if to convey all the unspoken words of thanks and admiration. The family continued their lives, now full of hope and opportunity, but always grounded in the values that had guided them through hardship. They continued to help neighbors, share what they had, and teach their children the importance of empathy, honesty, and courage. And the stranger remained a close part of their lives, not as a distant benefactor, but as a true friend and mentor. Years later, the children grew into adults who carried the lessons of their youth into the world. They remembered the night their family had chosen to care for a stranger in need, and they carried that memory as a guiding principle. They learned that even small acts of kindness could change lives, not just for the person being helped, but for everyone touched by that action. The stranger continued to visit over the years, sharing in celebrations, achievements, and quiet moments of reflection. Each visit reminded the family of the extraordinary power of ordinary people acting with courage and compassion. They saw that wealth without humanity was hollow, but humanity without resources could still shine brightly when fueled by love and kindness. In the end, the story of the family and the stranger became more than a tale of rescue or gratitude. It became a story of transformation, of lives changed not by money alone, but by courage, empathy, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. The family had nothing in the beginning, yet they gave everything. And in return, they received more than they had ever dreamed: security, opportunity, and the knowledge that their kindness had truly mattered. The stranger, once weak and injured, had been saved by the family, but he had returned the favor in a way that ensured the impact would last generations. And every time they looked at their home, shared a meal, or laughed together, they remembered the lesson that even in scarcity, love and courage create riches that endure far longer than any fortune. Their story was a testament to the human heart and to the incredible power of giving freely, expecting nothing, and trusting in the goodness of people.